All right, it is Tuesday night, and we're back with another edition of Goal Horns and Fight Songs. I'm Mike, that's Wes, and tonight we have another special guest joining us. Uh, some of you might know him from his work at the Grand Forks Herald. Some of them, like me, hear him on K-Fan and Beyond the Pond with Kevin Fallness and Pat Micheletti. You can also hear him on the UND Hockey Podcast. Brad Schlossman and Brad, I'm gonna say we're not beyond the pond, but you're not getting away from the Iron Rangers. I'm from Eveleth. So
Oh man,
you got Pat from Hibbing, you got me from Eveleth.
my mom's from Eveleth, so I have family in Eveleth. I go to Eveleth all the time. That's amazing.
Oh boy. Okay, so Wes, you're screwed here now
Yeah,
because
you
you got
got
you got
two
Iron
Iron
Rangers.
Rangers on the show with you. This is dangerous.
That's right. I don't know what any of that means. I'm from Michigan.
Probably
Uh,
for the best.
he's never been to the Hippodrome, has he?
No, he doesn't he hasn't been to the hip. He hadn't been up to Duluth, but I know Kevin was trying to go to the hall and broadcast from there, and Pat was talking to him about, well, you got to go to the hip because this kid had a tournament up in Hibbing.
It's a great place.
Right.
All right, Wes, where do you want to start off?
You know what? I'm gonna start here. So this is the last year of the COVID year. But I don't think it's going to be the last year where we see some movement in the transfer portal. Um, and I think certain rules there might actually be more movement than we were kind of expecting going into this year. AIC closing their program, going back to D2. The introduction of CHL players and the roster size. Rosters going down.
Yeah,
So I don't think
there's
there's a lot going on.
yeah there is. Uh, I think I do think our transfer numbers are going to be down without the fifth year. I think what happened with a lot of it was I went through and looked up how many guys went in the portal who only had their COVID year left, and it was like shockingly high. It was like 40% or more than 40%. So we could see a big drop, I think, in players going into the portal. Um, a lot of the guys who went into the portal were not guys who were necessarily seeking out a new home. Some of these programs said like, "Hey, we have recruits we need to bring in now." Like, and we can't keep everyone 5 years. So some of those kids were told they can't come back to their school for a fifth year, and then they ended up in the portal. So I think you saw a lot of kids that went in. Um, I think the second thing you mentioned was the roster limits. It's going to be really interesting to see how many schools opt in the first year. So if you don't know what's we're talking about, a little background is just that there's a settlement going on with the NCAA. And if you opt into the settlement, you can basically have a full scholarship for every player on roster. However, there are limits to the roster size. You also can do some revenue sharing with athletes. Not sure how much that's going to come into play with hockey, but football and basketball, it'll be a big deal. Um, the big schools have to opt in. They're part of the settlement. The Big Ten's all going to opt in. Arizona State's going to opt in. They have no choice. Now, Western Michigan, I think, for example, has 29 kids on the roster this year, maybe 30, 29, 30.
Yeah, it's somewhere there. I mean, they just added
Yeah,
Ryan Humphreys to
kid
the
from the
roster.
CHL.
Yep.
Yeah. Um, you can't have more than 26 if you opt in. So uh, it's going to be interesting to see that first year. I think there's a lot of unknowns right now. We don't even know can a D2 school like Duluth and St. Cloud who play Division 1 in hockey, are they even allowed to opt in? And then do their other sports not have to abide by these roster limits? So, and the other thing I should point out, like if you opt in Western may want to do so for the football program. You're up to 105 scholarships from 85. If you give any more than 85 scholarships in football, let's say they just go to 87, two more. you are opting in for every sport, and every sport has to be under that roster limit. So I think there's a lot of question marks about that, but that is a really good point. If some schools will have to cut guys because very few schools carry 26 or fewer. So that's another thing. And yeah, you're right. The CHL is going to be the last wrinkle that, teams are going to be able to go up to the WHL, OHL, and Quebec Maritimes Junior Hockey League and pick up recruits for the first time in decades and decades and decades. So yeah, a lot of changes.
I think going off of that, well, two things. One, D3 schools like a Colorado College, where they are a Division 3 school, that'd be interesting to know because, Denver's D1, but you said UMD, St. Cloud, they're D2. What do the D3 schools have? But then I was having with the CHL players a conversation with my brother Sunday. How much do you actually think that's going to affect it? Because the kids that are going to play in the CHL, they're getting recruited by those CHL teams and they're on those rosters. Is it just to the kids that are at the lower end of those rosters that will come down? Or to me, I'm like, if you're not making those rosters, you're either playing those other junior teams, but you're probably coming to the American Juniors leagues or college hockey in the NCAA. How much is it actually going to affect that?
I think you're going to see some very prominent players from the CHL come play college hockey. Now, they signed there when they were young. My theory is that some of these players, especially the top end players, have been playing there since they're 16. In the WHL, you might have a kid that's played there for 3 years and he's 18, high end player. Let's say he's ready to come to college hockey. His choice is going back to a fourth year of the WHL and being an old player and dominating against younger players, or he can challenge himself more in college hockey. Oh, and the other big thing, I think the college experience is way different than the CHL. You go live with your buddies. You're on a campus. You're not. Uh, you're going home to hang out with your teammates. You're not spending it at a billet mom and dad's house that you may not really know very well. And I think anyone who's been around a college campus knows it's a whole lot of fun. And I think when those guys start coming down, they're going to call their junior teammates and be like, "Oh my gosh, like you have to come see this. This is like a really different experience." Not even talking about the games played. Then you talk about the games and you have the student sections and the bands, and it's like it is a completely different atmosphere than you see anywhere else. And I just think some of these high-end kids are going to say, A, for the development piece, it's better competition. B, that looks like a lot of fun. You have teams, that have great nutrition programs, weight rooms. The facilities in college hockey are incredible. You have, high-end coaching. You have, I know there's really good coaches in the CHL too, but you have that in the NCAA as well. You have, a lot of these teams are flying charter planes to their road games. They're not busing across Alberta and Sask to go play a road game. It's just a different experience.
There's a age out too for the CHL too, isn't there?
Yeah,
Like
there is.
there's like so it's kind of similar to what we're seeing with the American juniors, where they're not quite old enough to take that next step into the minor pro leagues, or they have to go overseas after they're done playing in the Canadian juniors. But this kind of gives them another league to compete with, where they can't go play the ECHL or the AHL, because I think those leagues are like what 21 and up or something like that.
Well, it's basically the CHL. Kind of think of it like the USHL. It's the same ages. Are all the players going to be ready to come in college at 18 at the CHL? No. Are there players in the CHL that are not good enough to play college hockey? Yes, a lot of them. I just watched North Dakota play Manitoba Bisons in an exhibition game. It was not close. There were like 10 CHL guys on that Manitoba team. The bottom of the CHL probably can't play D1. They're right now the commits you're seeing out of the CHL are generally the age out players, as you mentioned. They're aging out. The CHL teams are happy to wish them well on their next journey. Where it's going to get a little interesting are the kids that haven't aged out. Some of those kids who could go back to their junior team, and their junior team's going to really want them back. But the USHL teams are used to this. They know the drill. When the kid's ready, okay, go ahead. When the kid commits at age 18 and he's going to go at 19, they celebrate it. You're not seeing that yet with the CHL. So I do think you're going to see some of those really high-end kids who are able to come in at 18. Most of them probably 19, 20, like USHL kids. Very few of those kids come in at 18.
So are they going to have the same flexibility that USHL kids have, or I think the other one's the NAHL, but the goaltender who's now at Lindenwood, I think he started with Minnesota, ended up going back to his junior team, was committed to Western. Western ended up getting Hampton, so he ends up signing with Lindenwood. I think was the path
Mhm.
there. But will they have that kind of flexibility too, or is that still being worked out and decided and not quite figured out yet?
Yeah, I think they'll essentially be just like USHL players. So um, the one interesting part, the way the rule is written, there was some confusion right away whether because it's a pre-enrollment rule, that rule change where can a kid come to college, then go back to the CHL and then come back to college. A couple kids have done it recently. There's a kid at Michigan, Christian Humphreys went and played left. Um, there was a kid, Noah Powell, did it at Ohio State. And so right away there's some confusion, but it sounds like those players are going to be able, the local compliance office will handle it. They'll let him in. Michigan State went and grabbed a kid named Tyson Jugnoth. He played a year and a half at Wisconsin and then went to the WHL. Now all of a sudden he's eligible for college again because WHL players are eligible. Jugnoth plans to go to Michigan State next year. So I would just think of the CHL kids just like USHL kids.
Okay.
And maybe there's some that are just going to sign pro contracts out of the CHL and go pro. But we'll see. There'll
Do
be a
you
big
think
battle.
do you think then I did hear this during hunting season on the NHL radio network on Sirius that Division 3 now is going to be getting better talent because with the roster sizes, it's going to be more competitive for D1, and there's only one Division 2 league. It's D1 or D3.
Yep.
Do you think we're going to see now more kids coming from D3 schools? Because I mean, I went to St. Scholastica D3 school, always competed against Adrian and St. Norbert, kind of uh, two of the top schools in the nation for D3. Um, do you think we're going to see more Division 3 kids coming through the pro ranks, and all of a sudden people are going, "Oh, what school is that? Oh, what school is that?" Where they played versus, you know, we'll see somebody from Holy Cross, and you're like,
Yeah.
somebody from Holy Cross made it to the show. Like what?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, that's a good comparison. And basically what I think of it, it's more the player pool is exploding. You have over 1,000 players now that are eligible in the CHL for college. And a lot of those players are going to come down and take those roster spots that other kids would have had. And those kids are going to trickle down to D3. So D3 is going to get really good. The talent level is going to go up. It just got a lot harder to play college hockey. You have to be even better because now the player pool is bigger, trickles down. So and from a D1 aspect, you're going to probably see more parity. The larger the player pool is, the more parity there generally is. And that's what we may see. Some really good players are going to trickle down to different programs. And, I kind of feel like the blue bloods are going to, I'm just throwing out numbers here, but they might get 10, 15% better. And some of the non-traditional powers, they might get 25% better. So, yeah.
And that just made me think of something though, is for the kids that are that have to end up going to these D3 schools that they can't go D1. They're not able to get scholarships. I was a tennis player. I mean, there's no scholarships at D3 schools. Is there potentially a path where a lot of these D3 schools can somehow form a league and or join that D2 league that they can give these kids scholarships to be competitive? Because I think that's going to be a turnoff for a lot of kids too, in a sense, where we can't get a scholarship. I'm not a scholarship player. Yeah, I want to keep playing, but it this could also bring revenue to those schools if
Yeah.
they're more competitive. I don't know if that makes sense at all, but I just thought
I'm
of that.
just not super familiar with the D3 landscape because I don't cover much D3.
Right.
We only have D1 here, and Minnesota Crookston, I guess, is D2, but we really don't do much D3 coverage, so it's not a
Right.
landscape I'm familiar with.
Yeah, I just know I'm just it's kind of a curious thought because the D2 schools there's a ton of them that are D1 for hockey, so could the D3 schools move up and give kids more incentive to come there? I don't know. But kind of going off this topic, one of the questions that I wrote down was we touched on it a little bit with the transfer portal, and this leads into it. You cover North Dakota a lot. North Dakota so far has been notorious for the transfer portal, losing kids, bringing kids in. And a discussion that Wes and I have had is how hot is Bradbury's seat each year because there's so much roster turnover. Last year, brand new
Mhm.
defensive core person comes in from Miami, and we all knew he was a good goalie, but it was kind of like, okay, you had this defensive core and now a brand new team. How is that going to turn out? And it just seems like they're the team that has the most turnover outside of Colorado College, where they lose a ton of kids in the transfer portal, but that's because they can't play there because there's no graduate program. So, what's the thought with his, and I mean, North Dakota prestigious program, but every year, what's his seat like? Like, is it very fluctuating or is it pretty stable there?
Well, I mean, as far as the transfer portal goes, I think it's basically based on your needs in that particular year. So the first year the transfer portal happened, UND had a massive senior class. They had, the Kawaguchi, Adams, Mismash, Kierstead, Tome, and then they had guys turn pro. And none of their, Keen was in that class. None of those guys came back for a fifth year. They all turn pro. So UND had to add, what was it, 13 or 14 new players. And your decision there is, do you bring in 13 freshmen and have a really bad season? Or do you go in the transfer portal and get a bunch of guys? Well, they still ended up bringing in, I think, the second largest freshman class in the league that year. But they brought in a bunch of transfers and they went and won the league. And I think that is, then what was it this last year? They had three guys in the portal. They took one guy at each position. Their needs just weren't as high. Um, Next year they're not going to end up taking a lot of portal guys. Their D is all freshmen and sophomores right now. They don't have an upperclassman on D, and maybe that's another topic for debate. Should they have grabbed a portal D and gotten older? They're the only team in the entire country that does not have an upperclassman playing on D. Should they have gone out and got one? They did. I guess they technically had one. He suffered a season-ending injury game one. Hasn't played since. Um, so and maybe that is part of it. Like there is pressure at North Dakota to win every single year. There is not um a lot of grace for rebuilding. the fact that people are talking about how hot is Bradbury's seat right now is a good example of it. This is the coach that's won the league 4 times in the last 5 years. He has won the Penrose 4 times in 5 years. He's been the head coach for 9 years and he's won it 5 times, so over half the time. And we're talking about whether he's going to survive another year. That
Mhm.
is, classic. I mean, part of it is classic modern day sports fandom that there is no, but that's I think maybe that answers the question. Why do you go get transfers? Because they don't want a rebuilding year ever. Even if you've won the league 4 times in 5 years, and you're ranked what 16 in the country, they don't want that. So that might lead into part of it that you just don't the fans here want to see a team that wins every single year, and that's the way you avoid trying to rebuild is you can get some older players, and you go and look at what Arizona State has done this year. Um, you know, ASU had big losses last year.
Mhm.
It looked like this was going to be a rebuilding year for ASU. Now, it's not. ASU is really good. Let's go look at their roster. ASU's leading scorer is Ryan Kerwin. They got him out of the portal last year from Penn State. ASU's second leading scorer, Noah Beck. Got him out of the portal last year. Third leading scorer, Bennett Shimmick. They got him out of the portal last year. Fourth leading scorer, Artem Schlane. They got him out of the portal last year. Um, that changes your season. And right now, I don't think ASU fans are. I think ASU fans are liking that.
Yeah.
The
I
same.
mean,
Western had to replace some immediate offense last year.
Yeah.
They went and got some older players. They got some older players on D. They needed to find some older D to help them out. And the older players, you can see how much they help. Like Robbie Drasner is a guy that I don't think teams were falling over themselves to get. And he has been a really solid, consistent piece for Western Michigan. And
Oh,
that just,
they have completely turned that decor around. Like they are not making the same mistakes that they were making last year. I think that decor is a big reason why they've only lost 3 games, and that those 3 games have been to BC, Michigan State, and
yeah,
Michigan. You know,
yeah,
Wes yelled at me last week, and I was like, "No, the past couple years, not this year. That your defense has been a little suspect." I was like, "No, no, no." Um,
yeah.
but getting back, like,
Everyone forgets about the mistakes the decor makes at Western because they have 2 guys behind them that cover him up pretty good. And then you go
yeah,
home and you don't remember that turnover that occurred.
oh,
no kidding.
yeah. But I mean, I think the brief moment that we got to talk down in the regional in St. Louis last year, the thing I said, I told you Western could beat Michigan State, but they can't let anyone get behind their D, and Camero has to have decent puck luck. One of the big plays that led to Michigan coming back was the player got behind Berger and was 1-on-1 with Camero and beat him, and then it was bad puck luck in the overtime. It was like the 2 things I didn't want to happen almost happened in succession, and Western was out, a 5-4 game in OT.
Yeah. And that was the guy that made the play might be the only guy that could on the ice that could skate past Carter Berger because he was a great skater, but that
Yeah.
was the number 2 pick in the NHL draft that made that play.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's I just do think there's this is a really good debate to have. Like, what is the right amount of transfers that you want on your team? And I think it just depends on what you have coming back, what you need to use to patch holes in your roster. And I don't think there's any doubt that you can use it if you use it right and be a very useful tool. Like North Dakota has two of their Penrose Cups in the last 5 years. One of them they lost 14 players and won it the next year. One of them they lost their entire D and won it the next year. So, I mean, that's pretty useful way to use it. And I think, Denver hasn't used it a lot. Denver's been a pretty successful team that has kind of went in and gone in and got a couple guys here and there. Then again, they've been really impactful players. Denver won the national title last year. They were in 2 overtime games in the national tournament. Guy who scored the overtime goal in both games was transferred, like It's a
Yeah,
great
yeah,
debate. What's the right level? What's, but I really think sometimes if you miss in recruiting, you might have to take a few more. You lose a couple guys you didn't expect. You might have to take a couple more. You have a big class returning, maybe not so many. So,
Well,
yeah,
I think
I
earlier
think
this week or late last week, I mentioned that to Mike and our buddy Trevor, that, like, I kind of look at Barry kind of similar how the Steelers fan look at Tomlin. Like, there's a history of
yeah,
success there, but
yeah,
it's not quite the success we're looking for. There was quite a few people who think that they should have moved on from Tomlin. He signs and stays another year. The guy's never had a losing season with that
yeah,
team. They don't want to rebuild it there either. But
yeah.
they're looking to win championships beyond just the conference title or the division title, whatever it may be.
And the question is, does firing Tomlin bring you closer? Is the next guy
Yeah, is the
going to
is the
be
next guy
worse?
Dan Campbell, or is he going to be Pat or Patricia, Matt
Yeah,
Patricia?
yeah. I mean, that's a really good question. You know, is not a huge Steelers fan or anything, but as someone who follows a little bit, honestly, you're probably more likely to slide back. You know, I think there is a thought that you know every new coach is an automatic. You're going to end up doing better, but boy, you can sure uh, it can sure backfire, and um, you know, I
Uh,
know we saw, I know Rico Blasi, things did go poorly at the end of his tenure, but things got worse.
yeah, yeah, and he's
yeah.
getting coming back into the conference with a new team.
Yeah, how fun is that?
And geez, they're
Yeah, and I think they could be pretty good, so that's going to be a fun storyline.
yeah,
Yeah, that first matchup between St. Thomas and Miami, either in Miami, especially if they go back to Miami, like that's going to be an
That's
interesting
going to be a
series to
very
watch.
interesting series.
and
Very
and
interesting series.
just how far St. Thomas has come in the last couple of years versus their first ever D1 game against St. Cloud, where they just it was the welcome to the show
Yeah,
kid moment for them. And then they, I don't know exactly what St. Cloud did in game two. I think that one ended up 3-1 or something, St. Cloud. But that first game, St. Cloud just went and was like, this is cute. You guys are
yeah,
D1 now. Welcome to this. Um, but I was gonna go back to the transfer, and you touched on ASU. Uh, Western with their needs, like Sam Coangelo coming from
yeah.
Northeastern,
Mhm.
he replaced Ethan, and then
Well, he would
Tristan
he would have replaced
or
Poland.
Jason.
Yeah.
He replaced Jason. Okay. Oh yeah, because Jason, it was Ethan, then Jason, and then Sam. Um, and then you're talking about Tristan scoring for Denver. Still upset about him because I asked him why he didn't convince Zeev to come to the Wild, so he didn't have to play him this year. Uh, but with Arizona State, their transfers, Wes and I both had them kind of in the middle of the conference. Are you surprised that they're on top of the conference? It seems like a lot of people are. I'm a little surprised they're where they're at. I just figured, at least right now, I figured they would finish in the middle of the conference. They weren't going to be down Miami, where CC had been, where UMD is right now. They would just be that 4, 5, 6 seed somewhere in there. So are you surprised?
Yeah, I had them about in that range too in my preseason poll. Um, and it was basically the big unknown for me. They had they've obviously been a good team, but they hadn't played the grind of the NCHC. The one year they went and played a Big Ten schedule, it did not go well for ASU. But again, they played an entirely road schedule. They didn't have any home games. When I looked at the roster, the talent up and down, I was like, this is actually a super loaded team. So what I do at the start of every year is I create my projected line charts for every team. And I kind of look at all the teams and say, okay, where do I think these teams are going to slot in? And when I did their projected line chart, I was like, you've got these guys on the fourth line. Like I had Sam Court as the seventh D. I'm like, if Sam Court is their 7th D, like that is a super loaded team. But the question for me was you know what the gauntlet is like. You look up at the schedule and it's like, oh, you're playing Denver this week. All right, well, next week oh wait, it's North Dakota the week after that. Okay, well, in the next, oh wait, then we go to Lawson after that. Okay, maybe this is a really tough stretch of games. After that, do we get a break? Oh no, you're playing St. Cloud, and then you're playing like and we're seeing it with St. Cloud State right now. Like St. Cloud State's a pretty good team. There's
Yeah,
just no let up in the schedule. Like
they are.
if things start going sideways for you, there's no team that's coming to bail you out.
No,
Like,
they can go downhill quick. I mean, they're 4-10 in the conference right now.
yeah, they were 4-2.
Yeah, and
They've lost 8 in a row. It can go south in a hurry in this league on you.
look at Colorado College. They started out the year 8-0. They come
Yeah.
in. They come and get a loss and a tie with Western, and they've been like 4-10 since or something like that.
Yeah.
Omaha's figured out how to turn it around. They had a bunch of injuries early. Thought they were struggling a little bit. They're 10-4 in the conference. Moved up to second place.
Yep. They also have a really tough stretch coming here. Omaha's played I don't want to take anything away from them. They have played well. The big sweep against CC and St. Cloud, really good. They've played Miami 4 times already.
Yep.
That helps.
Yeah,
But yeah, you're right.
They got a return trip here to Lawson coming up after Western swept them for like the first time ever at Baxter Arena. I mean, it's this part of the season is always like the most fun. Like, who are teams competing against? What does everyone's schedule look like?
Mhm.
Is it going to come down to that last weekend of the year? I think the thing that sucks for Arizona State is, they're going to be odd man out at the end of the year. So where they're sitting, they're hoping and praying for half of the games to go one way or another to determine their
Mhm.
seeding, because they're just watching that last weekend. If it comes down to the last weekend, like we've seen it do before.
It's very strange the way that they were able to set up the schedule with 8 teams was that everyone would have their bye week in February. 4 teams would have it one week, 4 the next, and then like the last 4 weeks of the year, everyone's playing. Everyone has equal games played. Now it's one team has a bye week for each of the last 9 weeks, and Western, North Dakota, and Denver have gotten their byes out of the way. So everyone else is going to have to sit one weekend. And we'll see where it goes. Western is in the driver's seat. The Broncos are in first place by a point, but they have 2 games in hand on both teams directly behind them. So this is a great opportunity for Western to win its first conference title, regular season conference title ever at the Division I level. And I certainly did not have them predicted in the top half of the league this year. I thought the Western has lost so many guys to pro contracts the last few years, and I just thought this is the year it catches up to them. Like I don't see this team scoring a lot of goals,
And I
but
mean,
there we are.
yeah, they're scoring at a pretty good
Yeah.
clip. They're about
They are.
middle of the road for the conference. They're not overdoing it, but they're not underdoing it. It's really their defense play is stupid good this year. I think that's
Yeah.
the most improved part of their game. You look at, especially, I think they're the number 1 team in penalty kill this year. They've allowed 55 penalties. They've only given up 4 power play goals to opponents. Their power play is up near 30%. I think I last looked, it was like 27-9 or something like that. Special teams are ridiculous or whatever. Coach Herder and JJ are working on has got him going in the right direction. But Firschweiler has said in multiple post-game interviews, like, guys are blocking more shots than they have in probably the last 10 years, which just shows the act of selling out and playing good defense can get your offense going. It kind of makes things easier on your goaltenders who are playing out of their minds right now. It's all going, and I think it speaks volumes to the coaching staff because, like you said, they turned over 70% of their offense this season.
Yeah.
30% came back.
Yeah.
No line, either offensively or defensively, is the same as it was last year. I think only 3 or 4 are fifth-year guys: Cam Rowe, Tim Washi, Cam Knuble, and Wyatt Shingothi are the oldest guys on the team. I think they're the fifth-year guys. Matteo Constantini's a senior who's been leading by example, playing really well. Alex Bump has gotten his stuff going in the last couple of weeks, and once again showing up late in the season. So they're going in the right direction for sure.
Well, I kind of joked with Pat Ferschweiler uh, a couple weeks ago, and when they were up here, and I said like Western is the place where guys go to resuscitate their careers. Like there are so many like this isn't like a group where like these guys have been just like things have come easy for them their whole lives.
Yeah.
Like Liam Valente already has his career high in points. Um, Grant Slakinski, who I covered when he was in high school, he had a tough go in the USHL for a year. He might have scored one goal when he was in Fargo his first year, and like he's gone through it and he is producing. Like Tim Washi, I would have never dreamed Tim Washi is going to score over 25 points. I would have never imagined that, but here he's going to have over 25. Zach Nearing, he had a tough year in the USHL, and he is scoring right now.
Yeah.
The Euro Hakkarainen, he was a solid player for Fargo. He's on pace to have over 20 points as a freshman. I like a lot of these guys are guys who it hasn't they've gone through their ups and downs. And so some of these guys were highly touted when they were younger, and then they kind of, people forgot about them and they come to Western and boom, oh yep, he's really good. He's going to get an NHL deal now. So
I mean, that was kind of the story behind Sam last year. I
Yeah.
mean, he had played well at Northeastern. He was drafted
Yeah.
by the Ducks, but there was a lot of talk that he wasn't producing the way they wanted him to, or they wanted to find something new for him. He comes to Western and lights fire in the second half of the season. He's made his NHL debut. He's played really well in the AHL. And then there's guys like Ethan Frank, Jason Poland, who they're not drafted. They come in, maybe they're under the radar a little bit. They spend a couple years in the system. They become leading nation goal scorers. They go play great NHL careers. Ethan's had an awesome NHL debut in the couple weeks that he's been up with the Capitals, which some of us may have thought was long overdue, but
yeah.
he got
Yeah.
there
Yep.
and has produced. And the fastest skates on ice are doing their thing, and he's playing really well. So
Yeah, and Adder, he's done. I think he got into a fight against the Wild his first year in the show with the Flyers. Can't remember who he fought, but I remember messaging Wes. Yep, Ronnie's in a fight now. uh, but Sam was telling us he was on his way to another visit when he entered the transfer portal, and he got a call from Western, and he was like, "Yep, I'm going to Western,"
Hmm.
because he had seen what Firsch has done, and it is amazing what that coaching staff has done. In the inverse is from what's happened here in Duluth after basically the 2020 season, when, in my opinion, they should have three-peated. Couple decent years, and then it's just gone downhill the last couple of years. Now they have picked it up the second half of the season here, but I don't I'm not as confident in my team as I have been before.
Yeah, I mean the other guy, by the way, I forgot to mention, of course, is Matteo Costantini, who I covered, and he had a really tough sophomore year. He had a great freshman year, 3 points as a sophomore, pops there. Duluth, yeah, I mean, maybe there are, a couple of years where the recruiting classes weren't quite what they had been. I think maybe you can wonder, should Duluth have gone into the portal a little bit more, gotten a few more impactful players to smooth over some of those classes? They didn't. But if you're a Bulldogs fan, I think, I don't know if they make the tournament this year. I think it's probably a long shot.
Yeah.
But when this is a legitimate, really good freshman class, and I think the guys have legitimate been everything I thought they would be. The plant kids are so
Yeah.
good. Like I watched a lot of the Duluth Denver game this weekend. Those two are on another level. They're going to be dominating college teams for 4 years, and there's a third one coming.
Mhm.
There's another plant kid coming. So
Yeah.
they're going to win games single-handedly for Minnesota Duluth the next few years. They've got good pieces with Kleber, with Hansen. Like right now, they're even Shagabe is a great
Yeah,
player.
yeah.
They're very you can't win all the. It's hard to win with freshmen. If you're freshmen or you're bus drivers, it's hard to do. North Dakota's finding that out a little bit on the back end right now, and even on the front end, their young players are their bus drivers. That can be tough. But when those players become upperclassmen, then you become really, really good. And I think right now, some of the upperclassmen at Minnesota Duluth aren't as much driving the bus as those younger players. So wait 2 years, and when those guys are upperclassmen, they're going to be a really special group together.
As long as they
And,
keep them all together. It's
As
been
long as they keep, and the fact that three of them
yeah,
are plants, they
yeah.
ain't going anywhere.
yeah.
You've got Hansen's he's from town there.
Hmm.
Like I just see a lot of these guys are like, they're not leaving.
Well, you got High School Hockey Town USA in Hermantown right there. I mean, that's a built-in. But for me, watching it, and you kind of hit on it with the upperclassmen, is when they had that stretch, the guys that were leaving, they had passed down that leadership, and there just seems to have been a little skip in passing it down. And what I'm seeing with this team this year, and it could be the immaturity of them being young, it's not that defensive identity. Now, Wes can attest, I was excited about this class coming in because I've watched these kids in high school hockey and I've watched them in the tournament. I know how good they are.
Mm.
You saw what Shagabe did at the tournament from Moore Road, and just, I mean, I did a practicum under Coach Andrews from Hermantown, and when Bruce was the coach, I mean, they're a perennial power. You know how good these kids are. And then Pionks, they're they've been there. Um, and the Hibbing kids, Hibbing's good again this year with Adam Johnson and Scotty Perunovic. There's local talent that they'll bring in. It just doesn't seem like they have that Scott Sandlin identity yet. And talking about the hot seat earlier, it was kind of we've had this discussion. Where's Sandlin at? Wes, I think you brought up, did the message get stale? I don't know how stale it can get in college hockey with how much turnover there is, but he also has a longer leash, and I do think that it's just a little gap in the leadership. And if you can keep these kids together, then it'll go there. Because I was super excited about this team going into the year. I'm getting more excited again. I was down on them.
So that's like I don't necessarily, I think it's more skill than leadership, because a lot of times I can see this coming from 3 years out. I like you watch these classes in juniors and I see who they have committed and I look on their commit list and I say, this group isn't quite there. And that's what I was saying 3 years ago. Now these guys are upperclassmen. They're all right, but they're not what you had seen with some of those other classes that won a lot of games. And so I think it's more of a fact. Like I think I don't think it's an issue of like how hard they play, or I don't think it's a leadership issue per se. I think it's more of like I could see these guys weren't tearing it up in junior hockey. These are not guys that, every program was, so I could kind of see that coming. Now, again, I can see what's coming in 2 years. When this group starts to get older, they add the third plant kid in. They have some good players committed. The Marthaler kid's a really good defenseman. I'm drawing a blank on some of the other commits they have, but um, like they're going to be good, and it's just that they're more talented, and I could see the downswing coming 3 years ago when I saw the classes that they were bringing in. They had some good players, but they didn't have the depth that they have previously had. So I think sometimes you can see it coming a few years out.
And I think it helps too now this year that we have two freshman goalies with Guyon and Knapp, and they both you can, when I've watched their shots, Guyon's hurt, and you could tell he wanted that back, but it was more of a freshman mistake. But most of what they've let in is just not their fault. And no offense to Stay Skull and Thiessen, Stay Skull, he had that 1 year off with his medical issue. He was good at Rapids. He was good when he was backing up in that 5 overtime game. Solid goalie, but I think that year off just kind of, like any athlete, it kind of hurts you and puts you back just a little bit. And they weren't quite there. And you go back to Kaz Koskisuo, he was on a really good team. He was a freshman. He left after his freshman year. He signed a pro contract, and well, he's not even in the league anymore because he had a good team in front of him. He was a good goalie. That I was at the game that he made the behind the back save against Omaha. But there's a give and take. You can be the best goalie in the world, like Person was on a bad team. You can see they're good, but you're not going to get the results. He goes to North Dakota. All of a sudden the results are there and everybody's like, "Oh wow, he's really good." Wes and I were like, "Yeah, we
Mhm.
know. We
Yeah.
could see that beforehand."
Yeah.
So I think that helps with both Nap playing the way he is and Guyon when he was starting. They're going to be good in a couple of years once they get more pieces.
Yeah, that's part of their core. They got to keep and I think they will keep that class together. I mean, that's college hockey fans don't like going through down years, but like I said, you can sometimes see things coming from a couple of years out, and I could see that. And maybe that's where you say should Duluth have tried to get some more impactful transfers in there to balance this out with, they could probably see that the guys coming in weren't going to be some, there's some good upperclassmen there, but like, I'm talking about the guys who really drive the
Mhm.
bus. Um, you know,
And
so
the guys who were there, they're the a couple of them left early. Who was Howard went to Michigan State.
yeah,
Yeah, that's son of a
Was it
he,
Steve?
he's killing it. Yeah, Steve's left.
Steve's left early, I think,
yeah,
after 2 years.
yeah.
Um,
That
guy,
one you predict
yeah,
when he came in, like he's an undrafted kid who's, how big is he?
Yeah, he
That's not one you penciled in. Some of these guys you can pencil in like he's going to be here 2 years. Like you did not pencil in Ben Steves being two and done.
yeah, I mean he was our offense.
Yeah, he was.
Like that was it. Um but it
You know,
yeah, Howard, that one, watching Michigan State, Minnesota, because it was on TV, and like, really, he he's on the first line. Thanks, a-hole. Like, I'm not mad at him. It's just one of those where as a fan you're like, "Oh, really? You had to go there." Um it it, it also kind of leads into the last question I messaged West. I had four. What does Miami have to do to just even I know they just went through a coaching change, so it's going
man,
to take a couple of years. Um,
they could not get out of their own way this weekend. Like,
they're just it's so hard to watch them, and as much of a rival as they are to Western, and West hates them, we want them to be competitive. We want this whole league to be. You look
yeah,
at the top three; they're within a couple points of each other, and then four through Miami are all within a few points of each other. It makes it that much more fun as a fan. We want them to be competitive. You're always going to have a team at the bottom. That's the nature of sports, but they are,
yeah,
oh boy, they're
yeah.
bad.
That's the only really team in the league. Like I'm sitting at home this weekend. Nodak didn't play this last weekend. And basically, you could put all these matchups, and no matter who plays in the league, and this is going to be a compelling game. St. Cloud's in like eighth place, Western is in first. If St. Cloud's playing Western, I'm like, this is going to be a great game. I don't know who's going to win. That's part of the fun part. Like you have no idea who's going to win on each night in the NCHC.
Mhm.
That's the one who's going to win most of the time. And that's just they're just not. It's just not as, and to answer your question, I guess, they need to recruit really well, get those recruits to campus. The hardest thing I think to do is to get the high-end kids to buy in when your team is bad. And, you have a high-end team who looks at what your team is. How do you say that's where I'm going to go? Um, so I think a lot of credit is due to like Chris Mayotte and Peter Menino and what they were able to do at CC because they had the same situation. They had to convince high-end players that this is going to work here. And they did somehow. Like they got Lava to come over. They got um Imberico was a highly touted recruit when he committed. He might have been the first one of their really highly touted recruits. Link was a pretty good player when they got him. And all of a sudden I'm watching recruits. I'm like, the type of recruit CC is getting right now has changed. They were not getting they were not getting Alaba, they were not getting in Imberico, they were not getting Veremiev. These were really good pieces that they were, Ryan Beck was really good at Dubuque. So th- that's essentially what Miami needs to somehow do is get they have a couple of Russian players who are going to be very good next year that are coming there. They need to keep supplying these guys. They need to keep them there so they don't, jump ship after a year or something, and build. And if you so CC like Chris Mayotte's first like 2 or 3 years, they were bad
Hmm.
because your recruits, when you commit them, they're juniors in high school, then they're seniors, then they're playing their 1 year at juniors, and then it's like year 4 when they're freshmen. And as we just talked about with Duluth, when your freshmen are the bus drivers, it's probably not going to go well. And then all of a sudden, as they get older, things pop. And they actually, I thought, were ahead of schedule. I thought last year that it was going to be their last year before they popped, and last year they popped a little bit. So they're a little bit ahead of schedule, but that's what they did. They recruited really well. They got their kids to campus. And now all of a sudden, if you're telling a high-end kid, I want you to come to CC, he says, oh, yeah, okay. But right now you have to really sell those kids that this is for real at Miami. Like things are going to change and they have to really they really have to be believers. It's
And
tough.
that's the thing. I'm happy to see CC back competitively because the last years of the WCHA, they were one of the top teams.
Yeah.
And going back a couple of years ago, it was, well, if you can keep it 5-on-5, you're fine. But if you go short-handed, McCown's going to score on the power play. And kind of
Mhm.
like Steve's, he was their offense,
Yeah.
but mostly on the power play. Now they're a dangerous team 5-on-5. They're competing with everybody. And like you said, other than anybody playing Miami, unless it's UMD, because apparently the last few years we've liked to lose to them, at least once. You know who's going to win that game. Otherwise, you don't know, and it makes it all the more fun.
Yeah.
It,
It,
it
that's
and it's not like it's not like Hockey East where you other than for a random year BC BU, they're always going to be pretty good. They're playing whoever you pretty much know who's going to win. This one, it's tune in. I was it last year we did our picks, Wes, that pretty much every week it was split. Well, this team might sweep, but I could see a split. And then Miami, well, they're getting swept. That just kind of just wrote that one off. Well, you got to watch this game. Which is the most entertaining?
yeah.
I think this, and we'd say one's the most entertaining. Then we get to the next one. Oh, I think this is going to be the most
Exactly.
entertaining series.
And that's the way it is like when you're watching at home, like I'm last week and I'm just flipping games and you know, it was fun. It's fun to do that, So
Oh, I like that four when you get all four going.
yeah.
Do the four thing. Only problem is a little more difficult when you have one team you root for that you kind of gotta do the one and then the three and try to pick the ones.
Yeah. NCHC TV is great.
I think we're gonna wrap it up with this one. But does college hockey understand its place in the sport? And to that, I mean, I think this kind of plays into what we are talking about, like coaching staff. Like they understand it's a step in the process. It's a developmental league of developmental leagues. Um, and maybe the NIL might make that a little bit more different. I don't think we'll see the same explosion that we see in football, where guys are making as
Yep.
much as top pros in
Yep.
their college team. I don't think we'll see that in hockey, but it seems to understand its place, and I think that's why you get kind of coaches who are able to stay longer, like a Sandlin, a Barry.
Yeah.
Um,
Carlisle.
Carl has said that he's really not looking at an NHL deal. He's happy in Denver. Um, Even Powers, to some extent, he's built that program from a club team to the Division One ranks, now to a conference. So do they understand their role in the hockey world better than basketball, which has the one and done rule, or football where you have to play at least 2 or 3 years and you can dip out early? Like these guys seem to understand, like, we're going to build players from freshmen to seniors for the most part, hopefully. If a guy's able to go early, like we've gotten him to the point where he can go early.
Yeah, I think I think so. I think there a lot of coaches, especially with the players that are leaving, if they're going to go jump into the NHL, and they realize, like, hey, it's time, and uh, they'll wish them well. And I'm trying to think of a good example of a kid. I mean, we'll see what happens with Alex Bump at the end of the year, but you know,
Why
he,
not?
he he's playing like a kid that's he's pretty good.
Yeah.
I
I mean,
mean,
it's expected that Zev's going to go join Minnesota.
that's a good example. So
Damn
like
well better.
after the season, like David Carl has no illusions that Zeev is coming back. He already is planning who's going to replace Zeev Buyam, and at the end of the season, he will hand him his contract and say, "Good luck. We can't wait to see you play for the Wild."
Yeah.
Like, are there situations where a coach kind of is like, "You're taking this kid, like he has you are going to bury him in your organization." I'm not going to name names, but there may have been a kid at Western who was
What? No way.
ready to go and ended up leaving early, and that happens. So kids have tough decisions to make. They have a lot of money thrown in front of them. They're gonna whatever. So I do think coaches understand how that all plays out. But it's the balance of you're trying to develop these players for the next level because they all want to play and make this their job and their career, and you're doing everything you can. You also got to win games. It's also very important to the fans of your teams, to the community, to the campus, the success of these programs. So you want to do both. You want to develop players, send them on, and win while they're on campus, and have a
I,
great experience for the kids while they're on campus. Great life experiences.
Yeah.
I think a good example though of programs and coaches that understand the development are the ones that have a bunch of undrafted players that sign pro contracts, and Western is one of them. UMD has been one of them recently, like Nick Swaney, or I don't think Swaney was drafted. I can't quite remember, but Nick Wolf, uh, defenseman,
Hmm.
he undrafted signed. Western's had a bunch of undrafted players they sign, and then they go on to have pretty decent pro careers, and a lot of kids they'll make it above the drafted players. And if you can prove yourself as a program that regardless of if you're drafted or not, we will develop you, you're going to get really good teams. And then you're going to recruit more kids, keep winning games. Your fans are happy, you're happy, and the players coming there are happy because they know if they go to your program, they're going to get a pro deal somewhere. And that's why Denver and North Dakota and BCBU have been so successful because they produce these players. They made themselves a name, and now kids want to go there.
Yeah, I mean, and I think the NCHC, a good debate is about the makeup of teams. Michigan's had some teams with like 6 first rounders.
Mhm.
BU too. Uh, they've had some pretty good teams with those guys. So, but the teams that have won the national championship have been teams that are generally built with the NCHC model of mid to late round draft picks mixed with good undrafted players that are become really good upperclassmen. And if you look at a lot of those national title teams, it's the similar formula on a lot of those teams. And that seems to be the formula. If you can get a few really good classes in a row and stack those classes and let them become older players, really good older groups mixed in with maybe 1 or 2 young first round pick types, or high end impact types, I should say. That seems to be the formula right now to teams that are winning the national title. And we'll see if it continues this year, or if maybe this is the year one of those really young teams finally gets over the hump.
Yeah, because what was it? I can't remember exactly which year it was, but all 5 Minnesota teams made it, and I believe it was 3 out of the 4 were in the Frozen Four. Um,
Is that the year
I
Denver
think it
won?
was,
Denver's Carl's first championship. Minnesota State was playing really well.
yeah, I think so.
And
With
they had the cheater Drayden McKay.
yeah, I couldn't think of his name.
St. Cloud, no. Who
It,
did? I can't remember now.
I think St. Cloud made it to the championship because I was
That
cheering
was a
against
different
them.
year. That was 2021. They lost to UMass.
And then
I think it's
there was
2022, wasn't it?
2022 is Denver over
Minnesota State.
Minnesota State. Like
Yeah.
that year, Denver played Michigan in the semi, right?
trying to remember because what year was
Yeah,
it?
they
I
did.
know all 5.
They beat Michigan in overtime in the semi.
Oh no, Michigan lost another Frozen Four appearance. Darn for them.
Mankato beat.
Sorry, I have very little love lost for the team from out east.
That's okay. I have other than hockey, I love the Gophers, but hockey, I'm like, no. Uh, they can go suck an egg. Even though I have no ill will
Mankato
against
beat Minnesota.
yeah, that's right. And I was super happy about that.
Yeah.
I think the only time didn't North Dakota beat Minnesota for the national championship in like 2016, I want to
Uh,
say.
they beat Quinnipiac.
Okay. I was trying to think, but I think that was the one time I actually cheered for North Dakota. Uh,
With
because yeah, it was
very
North.
yeah. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say it because I know it was North Dakota, Denver, because Denver beat UMD in Chicago, and then UMD here, UMD in Buffalo, COVID, and then I think that was the UMass year that you said.
Hmm. Pittsburgh.
Um, then I can't Quinn. Well, Quinnipiac was this
2023 was Quinnipiac.
2023. Denver was this past year, 2024. I can't remember who won 2022.
It was Denver over
Denver.
Mankato.
Denver won that one.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they had the third period comeback over Mankato.
Yeah, that was a fun game to watch. It was so tightly contested too for most of it.
That was a good game.
Freaking oh man, dude, that run that the Denver goalie went on that year was stupid.
Magnus.
Yeah. Because that was, I mean, it was him and I think that was also the year that Fanti went on his little run and they just happened to meet again where they had like,
Yeah.
because he had, Fanti had that super good frozen face off in St. Paul. He stopped Denver and then made one good save against Western that really turned that whole stupid game around, and he shuts out the frozen face off back to back games. And then Denver and Duluth met up again, in the national title tournament. And I think I told you I think Denver's finally got this one because they'd shared so many, they'd met so many times that season.
It was like between them and St. Cloud, UMD and St. Cloud, with those 2 years, that was crazy how they played 12 times within 2 years, because the two series, and then they both ended up 4-5 and had to play the first round.
Right.
Yeah,
And whoever
both
won
went
that
on-
series, yeah, won the frozen face-off.
But yeah, no, I think first I want to thank you for your knowledge, and you are one of the top follows in college hockey, whether it's through the Grand Forks Herald, through Twitter, all the podcast stuff you do. You're a great resource to follow and be kept up to date on everything, not just UND, but college hockey as a whole.
Appreciate that.
So we're happy to have you both here on the podcast and as a resource that I definitely take advantage of when I can. Mike, anything else to wrap us up with?
I mean, I'm not gonna go fallness on the bit, so I'm good.
Yeah, I think we'll finish it there. There's YouTube stuff that usually happens. Stuff's been scrolling across the bottom of your screen. If you feel like giving it a like, a subscribe, cool. If not, whatever. We have our personal Twitter handles. Oh, do you want to give your Twitter handle out? Ours have been very small at the bottom of our pictures, but they've been out there for, I think, 150 episodes or not by now, so someone should know them.
Perfect. And mine, Schlossmen GF.
So, other than that, there's only one thing left to say. Pucks on net, good things happen, like goal horns and fight songs. Until the next episode, we are gone. That's the wrong button. That's the right one.